Good evening. This is Perrysburg City Council for September 15, 2020. Please roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne.
Here.
Mr. Kuhlman.
Here.
Ms. Materney.
Here.
Mr. Matuzak.
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Here.
Thank you.
If you're able, please stand and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Minutes of the meeting of September 1st, 2020.
Thank you, Your Honor. I do have a copy of the minutes here, and I believe everyone has received those as well. Hearing that there is not any amendments to be made, I would like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Mr. Kuhlman.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Yes.
Thank you.
We have no special reports, letters, communications, citizens' concerns. You have something to say about a particular topic that might be if space available, or time when that topic comes up on the agenda. Seeing nothing, administrative reports. I have no report other than two acts that we can do. One is to make a recommendation of Catherine Cedretto, Esquire, as the next law director for the city of Perrysburg, and I understand the council will take that up as their presence. This is also the last meeting of our current law director, and we want to make sure we publicly acknowledge her for her hard work and service to the community, and we want to wish her much success and future happiness in her new job, although we wish you nothing else? Administrative report?
No report, John.
It's like we can sleep.
Yeah.
You know what? All right, finance director?
Yeah, no report tonight.
Thank you. Director of law? President of council?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a few things here. First, before we go into Ms. Andretto, we do have a public hearing to announce on October 6th at 6:15 p.m. and October 6th at 6:25 p.m. for some code amendments. If anybody hasn't received a copy, they should have been in your mailbox. If not, I can make sure to get this email to you. With that, we have received and held our council committee of the whole meeting for Ms. Andretto, and I would like to make a motion to approve the administration's request to have Catherine Andretto as our next law director.
I'll second. Discussion? Roll call?
Okay, Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Mr. Kuhlman.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations, really important work.
And then with that, I do have a quick statement here. As I've had many individuals in our community reach out, I want to take a moment to comment on the events that took place at the Recreation Committee meeting on September 8th. As President of Council, I would like to first offer an apology to Ryan Wickman, Wood County Place, and the members of our community that had to experience and witness the events of that evening. I would also be remiss to point out that the actions of one council member are not necessarily representation of the rest of council. It is due to the actions of that night that I'm going to task our personnel committee to hold discussions and potentially bring forth a professional code of conduct for city council as well as appointed committees with the goal of passing legislation by the end of this year. I will be emailing to all of council this evening a couple examples that I've found in different communities around the nation to utilize as a starting point and for reference. and look forward to our new law director assisting with this. It is unfortunate that we are at the point where we need to have a discussion on how to be professionals, and I hope that once we can create a code, that we never have to point to it again. So that is the end of the President Council report.
Thank you. Finance and Economic Development Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. My last son, so I can see. We have met, or we did meet, since our last council meeting. We met on September 8th as well. It was just before the rec committee meeting. The meeting was called to order at 5:32 p.m. Members of the committee that were present were myself, Councilwoman Warren and Councilman McCarthy. Also present were Ms. Abbott, Ms. Alkire, Mr. Krebs, Mr. Rathburn, and Mr. Ronder. I've got several sections in here. I'll go through the 3 sections that actually have related legislation for tonight, and the stuff at the end I'm going to just kind of skip over. It's the stuff that we do every month. The first item up was the resolution in support of an NOAC letter of intent. Mark Fry, who is here tonight, I believe. Palmer Energy was present via teleconferencing at that committee meeting. He was a busy guy that night. Ms. Alkire stated that the administration is requesting approval of a resolution to authorize the mayor to sign a letter of intent for the acquisition of solar energy from municipal facilities through the city's participation in the Northwest Ohio Aggregation Coalition. Ms. Alkire stated that this is just the first step in the process and the letter of intent is non-binding. She stated that the committee had previously been given a presentation by Solar Power and Light, but it makes better financial sense to go with several other communities. And Mr. Fry stated that Palmer Energy, on behalf of NOAC, has been evaluating solar energy for several years. There was discussion regarding the number of communities involved, the megawatts that would be needed, and the acreage required for an array large enough to produce the needed megawatts. Mr. Fry said that if the number of megawatts needed gets high enough, they may need to look into breaking the solar array into 2 locations. Mr. Tuzak and myself asked about the useful life of the array, and Mr. Fry said about 20 to 25 years. There was plenty of discussion. I guess, I'm not sure why that one made my report, but okay. There was a lot of discussion. It was actually pretty interesting. Ms. Alkire explained that after Palmer Energy does an RFP, Mr. Fry would come back to City Council for approval of a power purchase agreement. Ms. Warren asked if we could perhaps connect to the Bowling Greens array that they currently have. Mr. Fry said he doesn't think we can. And Ms. Alkire said, based on her experience, that state law prohibits municipal utilities to sell more than 50% of their inside consumption outside the municipality. The committee did agree 3-0 to recommend approval of this resolution, and we have that here before us tonight. I said that I think that the rest of the city council should have an opportunity to ask questions. Mr. Fry is here. If any of you have any questions, we'll bring that up during the discussion phase of the legislative process. Ms. Alkire said that they will see Mr. Fry is available at the council meeting. Is here. Next item, appropriation of additional CARES funds. Ms. Alkire reported that after the last city council meeting, the administration was notified by the Wood County Auditor's Office that the city would be receiving a second distribution of CARES Act funds in the amount of $314,000 and change, which is half of the amount we received during the first distribution. She requested approval of legislation appropriating these funds into the fund categories of personnel costs, materials and supplies, equipment and contractual expenses. We had seen that before from the administration and the way that they had accounted for the initial distribution within those different funds. I asked about grants to businesses since we had more money coming in, and Ms. Cabot said she spoke to Wade Straka, I always say that wrong, the Wood County Economic Development Commission, and he said that only one business in Perrysburg is in line to receive a grant. And so we don't think there's anyone in Perrysburg that has applied for any of that money. And Ms. Cabot reminded me of some discussion we had at a previous meeting that fortunately nobody is eligible for any of that money because they've already received something through one of the federal programs. The committee agreed 3-0 to recommend approval of the legislation. And in the jobs grant application, representatives of Satellytics were present to request approval of a jobs grant application. The application states that the business is currently located in space provided by the University of Toledo, and they currently employ 16 people with annual payroll of $1 million. The business is looking to relocate over to Levis Commons and expand. They anticipate creating 35 full-time positions with payroll of $3.5 million by the end of 2023, with a $2 million threshold being hit in 2022. The jobs grant would begin once the threshold is met. There was discussion regarding what type of work the company does and the type of work done by the employees that they would be adding. It was actually very interesting. If you have any questions, just ask during the discussion phase in the legislation. That is how many of the employees and what volume of work would actually be in Perrysburg. Sean Dunnigan, President and CEO of Satellitic, stated that 100% of the Brain Trust is currently in Toledo, but the goal is to keep their entire footprint in Perrysburg. And the committee then agreed 3-0 to recommend approval of the jobs grant application, which I have right here tonight. And then we had the customary reporting from the finance director. There were no real issues for concern there. And then the tax commissioner reported on tax collections. I guess in a nutshell, year-to-date tax collections are down about 6% in the same period in the report. There being no further business, that being adjourned at 6:40 p.m. So I have 3 pieces of legislation, ordinance and 2 resolutions. They're not at all related to one another. So I'm going to separately, we'll go as fast as we can. The first one, I would like to introduce ordinance 13/2020. And move that the rules be suspended to allow first reading by number and title only and to dispense with the second and third readings.
Second. Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Ordinance number 13, 2020, amending ordinance number 10, 2020, to amend appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures for the year beginning January 1, 2020 and ending December 31, 2020, and declaring an emergency.
Okay, I move that ordinance 13/2020 be passed as an emergency measure. Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
All right, Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, I'd like to introduce Resolution 45/2020 and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only and to dispense with the second and third readings. Second.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Resolution number 45, 2020, authorizing the mayor to execute a letter of intent for the potential purchase of solar-generated energy through the Northwest Ohio Aggregation Coalition.
Thank you. I move that Resolution 45/2020 be passed. Second.
Discussion.
Yes. Ms. Halker, we didn't have a legislative summary this time around, did we?
Yes.
Did we?
Yes,
I
yes.
didn't see it. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. I don't know if Mr. Brown wanted to give up. I'm sorry. Or you put that out for us to say this, we didn't have one, maybe you could fill us in. You could fill us in. If you'd like to make a presentation. Because there was a lot of information for different than we didn't authorize this letter of intent isn't binding in any way on us. It was actually very interesting.
That's correct. So Resolution 45/2020, and Mr. Fry is present from Palmer Energy, and he'll answer any technical questions that you may have. Understand that the letter of intent is significant enough for the distributors that Mr. Fry would be seeking proposals from through the RFP to understand what loads they would be committing to supplying if they were ultimately the successful proposal. The letter of intent is binding in the sense that we would be accepting Palmer Energy as our energy consultant, as we already have for this specific project, but it's only the first step in the process. First, we have to examine whether or not solar is appropriate for the city of Perrysburg, whether or not it makes sense, and we're talking about utilizing solar for municipal facilities and making solar available to our customers as well. Currently, we participate in electric and gas aggregation through our partnership with Northwest Ohio Aggregation Coalition. Mr. Fry is our consultant through Palmer Energy on that. But when it comes to the very specifics of it, The proposals will be received by Palmer. We think as an administration, this is a smart move to include our load. When you spread our load along with all of the other communities that they're looking at utilizing, it spreads some risk from my perspective. Certainly we've talked to other companies who wanted to just work with the city of Perrysburg, but there are so many intricate details when you're talking about a solar farm sufficient to power our load. Finding land, funding the actual infrastructure. In this situation, we're seeking to be part of a larger conglomerate, so we're not bearing the burden of that all on our own. Once those proposals are received, they'll be evaluated and a recommendation will be made by Palmer Energy to the communities if they find that those proposals were sufficient to meet their needs. Only then would the City Council be considering a power purchase agreement for the acquisition of the solar generation. So we have your generation, your distribution. We're only looking at the generation here. Power purchase agreement, you're looking at a 20 to 25-year agreement. I believe that would fall underneath City Council's purview, and you would want to see that agreement and go through the legal review when that comes to be. I will give the floor to Mr. Fry so he can explain the ins and outs of the proposal process.
Thank you. Members of council, mayor, thank you very much.
Do you mind saying your full name and address just so we
Sure.
know?
Mark Fry with Palmer Energy Company, 5577 Airport Highway, Toledo, Ohio. Palmer's been consulting with the city of Perrysburg and the other communities with the Northwest Ohio Aggregation Coalition for about 20 years. And right now, the city, along with other communities in Lucas and Northern Wood counties, have about 120,000 households and residential and small businesses participating in the electric aggregation. And over the past 20 years, we've saved somewhere on the order of $100 million for the consumers that participate in the program. So probably a year and a half ago, we started looking at solar behind the meter. Couldn't figure out a way to make those economics work for most of our communities and for our customers. And when I saw a power purchase agreement that the city of Cincinnati did to buy electricity from a solar array down in Highland County, that price point was such that it made sense to me to start looking at that on a much broader basis. The city of Cincinnati obviously is large enough that they can do their own. That array is 100 megawatts. There's some other larger solar power arrays that are under construction, and to give you a sense, the one in Bowling Green is 20 megawatts. So that would be 5 times this big. So far, Palmer's been working for a number of months to get a group of communities, and together we work with the County Commissioners Association, and as we speak right now, we have we have 45 different counties and communities that have already signed a letter of intent. And we expect probably another 5 to 10 more before we actually put the RFP on the street. If we get those 5 or 10 to actually sign up, the actual solar array power purchase could be as much as 400 megawatts, between 350 and 400. And to give you, so that's 3.5 or 4 times the size of Cincinnati's with all the various communities. What we're talking about is putting an RFP on the street, as Laura described, but we're not buying all the electricity for your facilities and or the governmental aggregation participants. It's only a portion. We're recommending 25%, but obviously that's ultimately your decision as members of council and the administration. So we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. The rest of the electricity would be purchased in the manner in which we've done it in the past. We put it on the street, and 20 or 25% of it would be coming from the array. The remaining 75 or 80 would be coming from the grid, as it currently does. We do expect over time that the outcome through inflation on the cost of electricity at a wholesale level would reduce the overall cost through the solar array, but initially we do expect that there's likely to be a small premium, and that's based upon the analysis of looking at what the power purchase pricing is from the city of Cincinnati. So I do expect that we're going to be competitive with those prices and may well get better than the city of Cincinnati's price, just because our array may be 2 or 3 times that size. So the law of diminishing returns kicks in at some point, but there's still an economy of scale that is available with a larger array. So, and to give you another sense, when we started looking at this some months ago, the entire state of Ohio only has 261 megawatts. So this would exceed the entire production of solar electricity in the state of Ohio
once this array comes up and running. There's a bunch of other large arrays that are under consideration. Many of the large companies such as Amazon, Facebook, and others that are moving into central Ohio have announced they want to be carbon neutral by a certain year. And so therefore, I'm assuming that most of those arrays are driven by those power purchase agreements with those large firms, but I'm not absolutely certain of that. So I would be happy to answer any questions. This is, as Laura said, just the first step in the process, and we would be coming back to you with the end results once we get the pricing back.
Where are you thinking of purchasing the property? You mentioned it with other developers. Where would that be?
We're going, because we're putting this through an RFP process, the developers are going to decide where they want to put it. They're professionals in determining the best spot. And like any other development, it's driven by the location. So you need to have certain characteristics. You have to have a certain amount of ground. To give you a sense, a 100 megawatt solar array, depending on the layout of the ground, is 500 or 600 acres. And that probably means you're going to be somewhere in the middle of a farm field. Most likely, based on looking at the location of the other arrays, it would be south of I-70, southwestern Ohio. But more recently, you may have read in the local paper that there was a large array that was announced out in Fulton County as well. So we're kind of agnostic. All we want is the lowest price possible for the electricity. We want it in the state of Ohio, but we don't necessarily want to drive it to a specific location because we have half the counties in the state of Ohio participating in this program right now, and every one of them would love to have it in their county. But if you start to do that, you'll balkanize the process. That's the reason we want to do an RFP.
Thank you.
I guess what's the projections on when this can come to fruition? So, like, can you take me step by step what we're looking at in the process?
Sure. We would expect sometime in mid-October to put the RFP on the street. We would probably be getting the responses back sometime after the first of the year. And I would fully expect that there's probably going to be an interview process. If we get to the 400 megawatts, which we hope to, that's about a $400 million investment, although the city isn't putting any money out. It's still an awful lot of money for a developer to put out. And because of that, we've added on to our interview team. We've also included some other people on the team beyond just ourselves at Palmer Energy. We've added Paul Toth from the former president of the Toledo Lucas County Port Authority, Dale Arnold, the director of energy for the Farm Bureau, gentleman by the name of Russ Zimmerman, who used to be the president of Romanoff, and another gentleman that retired from Mosier Construction, Joe Lazar. So we want people that understand physically how these things are constructed to be able to answer and make us comfortable with those questions. But that process will probably involve interviews because this is such a significant project. Once those interviews are done, that's probably going to take a couple of weeks. Then we're looking at, assuming it clears the hurdle economically, we come back to a recommendation to the various communities that are signed the LOIs and work through the power purchase agreements with the various communities. That's probably going to take a couple of months based upon timing of various communities. And so you're probably looking at summer of 2021. The construction process is going to be very dependent upon who the developer is. If it's a developer, because there's developers that already are moving forward with projects. If we find a developer who is already at the power siting board and is already partway through the approval process, we could potentially be up and operational in mid-22. If we select a developer that isn't ready to go or doesn't have anything at the power siting board, that's probably going to lag into sometime in early 2023.
Okay, and just to be clear, you guys have not, going based off your answer to Deborah's question, you guys have not selected a concrete location for this project? No,
I do expect it's most likely it's going to be in southeastern Ohio based upon the location of the others that have been announced, but I don't know that. Okay. It's really driven by, in this case, when you put a development in, you want access to an interstate highway. If it's a commercial development, you want access to traffic counts and different things. There's an analytic process. Same thing happens with a solar array. In this case, you need ground, you need access to the transmission grid at a very specific spot to reduce the interconnection cost as much as possible. And you have to have willing landowners, because we are talking about if 400 megawatt array could be 2,000, 2,500 acres of ground. So it's probably a series of landowners. I don't know how many landowners in Ohio own 2,500 acres that they'd be willing to sell. But so all of those things need to work together.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Fry. I appreciate you coming.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
We appreciate your expertise as well. Roll call?
All right. Let's start with Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, I would like to introduce Resolution 46, 2020, and move the rules be suspended to allow first reading by number and title only, and to dispense with the second and third readings. Second.
Roll call?
Okay, Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Yes.
Resolution number 46, 2020, authorizing a job creation grant for Satellytics Incorporated and declaring an emergency.
I move that Resolution 46, 2020 be passed as an emergency measure. Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Okay, Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Yes.
Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Service committee?
Service did meet. We met September 10th. Meeting was called to order at 6:33 by Chairperson Jan Materney. Committee members present were Corey Coleman and Jonathan in the chamber with us and Jonathan Smith via teleconferencing. Also present were Bridget Cabot and City Administrator and Laura Elkar, Law Director. The first item of business we dealt with was the award of construction of multi-use path, Phase 4. Ms. Elkar stated that bids were open September 4th for construction of Phase 4, which goes from the bridge to the lower parking lot of Fort Meadows. 5 bids were received, with Crestline Paving and the lowest and best at $298,391. The bid was 0.5% over the engineer's estimate. The administration is requesting approval of 10% contingency. Tetra Tech, the design engineer, did an opinion of a probable cost and a recommended 17% overage, but the administration feels that since we are doing the inspection in-house, 10% will be sufficient. There is $591,624,000 in the 2020 budget for this project. Ms. Elkar said that the administration is requesting this as an emergency to try and get it in before winter. Ms. Cabot said that the temporary easement with the state of Ohio expires January 1st, 2021. Mr. Smith asked if the archaeologist will be involved. Ms. Cabot said that the archaeologist will be on hand during excavation. The committee agreed 3-0 to recommend approval of the contract. The second item we dealt with, and all these will be coming before council tonight, is ODOT LPA agreements for State Route 25 or Rochester Road, State Route 25 or Preston Parkway intersection improvements. There's some stuff you need. Ms. Elkhart request approval of LPA agreements with ODOT for the intersection improvements at State Route 25 or Rochester Road and State Route 25 or Preston Parkway. She stated that this is a standard agreement as part of any federal or state dollars when working with ODOT. Ms. Cabot said that both projects have TMACOG grants associated with them. She stated that the Rochester Road intersection will be a bid with the State Route 25 west-south boundary intersection, and hopefully will go out to bid yet this year, so they are lined up for the spring. Preston Parkway intersection involves a mast arm, and there's significant lead time involved with ordering that. Ms. Materney commended the administration being proactive with bidding out these projects so far in advance because you normally get a better response. Mr. Smith asked if these projects are consistent with what has been discussed in the past. Ms. Cabot said that they comply with the access management plan as approved by City Council. The committee agreed 3-0 to recommend approval of entering into LPA agreements with ODOT for both projects. Permission to purchase plow truck. Mrs. Elkar requested approval of 2 pieces of legislation to purchase a plow truck for the Department of Public Service. The first resolution is to approve the purchase of the 2021 International HB 507 cab and chassis from Rush Trucks in the amount of $84,316.14. The truck will go to Henderson Products to be equipped and outfitted to be a snowplow at the cost of $98,181. There's $190,000 in the 2020 budget for this purchase. Mrs. Elkar stated that these purchases are being made through the state competitive pricing and Sourcewell competitive pricing, so we do not have to go out to bid. The purchase was on the deferred budget item list during COVID, but it has become a necessity. The vehicle it is replacing will become a Bryan vehicle. Councilperson Coleman asked if the administration is comfortable with the budget at this time and move forward with this purchase. Ms. Cabot said they are. The committee agreed 3-0, recommended approval. Agreement for the design for State Route 25 and Indiana Avenue and intersection improvements. Ms. Cabot said that RQFs were sent out and reviewed for intersection improvements at State Route 25 and Indiana Avenue. She said that there is a TMACOD funding attached to it and funds will be available July 1st, 2021. Manica Smith was chosen to do the design of the intersection. An initial scope meeting was held and Manica Smith will be submitting a fee schedule between $70,000 and $90,000. However, this project involves crossing CSX tracks and a scope meeting will be held out in the field with ODOT, city employees, and Manica Smith. After the meeting, they will be submitting their fee schedule and the administration would like to bring it to City Council at the October 6th council meeting. Ms. Cabot said she talked to Manica Smith about a multi-use path on the north side of Indiana Avenue to hook up the multi-use path at the cemetery and including bike lanes on Indiana Avenue. She said there are some challenges involved, but they are exploring them. Ms. Materney said she would like to see us explore multi-use paths and bike lanes with all future projects. The committee agreed 3-0 to recommend approval of the contract with Manica Smith. And other business, Mr. Smith said that he checked trash cans on Sunday at some of the parks in downtown and many were at capacity. He said he would like to see the community stay clean. Ms. Cabot said that she talked to the service director and asked him to assign someone to check the parks in downtown on Sunday mornings. She said they will monitor it over the next several weeks. There being no further business, the meeting adjourned at 7:14. Respectfully submitted by Jana Materney, Council Chairperson. Next meeting September 23rd, 2020 at 5:30 p.m.
Take a break.
Thank you. Let me get a drink of water. So, as a result of that meeting, I have 5 resolutions to present to council. I believe all of them are emergency, correct?
Are you doing together or separate?
I would like to do them together, but I imagine that will not be possible, so I can do them separate.
Or can we do like 48 and 49 or both for 025?
Yeah, the only one I wouldn't do with it would be
Which one?
the one for the piece of equipment. The dump,
The dump truck. How about for the multi-use path?
with that, yeah, we could do
Let's
that.
do it separately, these 2 together, and then
The other 3.
It'd be 51 to 5 together.
Ms. Materney, could you separate all of them? That would be great.
or we could just separate them all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Big one. Okay. introduce Resolution 47, 2020, and move that the rules be suspended, allow for its reading by number and title only, and dispense with the second and third readings.
Second. Roll call?
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Resolution number 47, 2020, authorizing the award of the bid and agreement to Crestline Paving and Excavating Company for the provision of construction services for Phase 4 of the Maumee River Multi-Use Path, ODOT PID number 101863, in an amount not to exceed, in the amount of $298,391.19, and declaring an emergency.
I move that Resolution 47, 2020 be passed as ordinance.
Mr. Mayor,
Second.
I have discussion. On this ordinance in particular, or I'm sorry, resolution in particular, I will be voting no. In 2002, it should be stated that the residents of the city of Perrysburg voted down crosstown bike paths in the city of Perrysburg 60 to 40% in the city, and I would like to respect their opinions on that.
Just to be clear, that was a resolution or a citizen request to have a multi-use path down Indiana Avenue. This path is not down.
Correct. This is connecting the one that's already in existence to Fort Meigs.
All right, just to clarify that. All
And
right.
it's not alongside any roadway.
But I will also add that, if I may, that I am concerned about the one near the water, which I was going to add to this. It will go, the petroleum from the tar will go into the water, and from an environmental standpoint, I think that's a real concern we should have. So I will be voting no on that one.
Do the question?
Yeah. I'm looking at the report that was just read, the legislation in the report. To me, I'm not clear on this. The bid came in at $298,391, which is the amount that's being approved in the legislation. But Tender Tech suggested a 17% overage, and the administration said they're good with 10% overage. Is that 10% baked into that bid of $298,391, or is that over and above?
Sorry, pardon me.
The construction bid that was received of $298,000, that does not include a contingency, so we are suggesting a contingency of 10% above and beyond that.
Why would that not be in the legislation? That's section one.
For your defense review.
Yeah, but it's not doing
It's noted in section 1 of the legislation. So we want to, whenever we do these, we want to award the bid, but we don't want to award the bid with the additional amount directly to the contractor.
Right.
So in section 1 of your legislation, this legislation would be authorizing the mayor and director of finance to award the contract in the bid amount, and then further authorize up to 10% of that amount to be approved administratively in the change orders for a total amount as stated there. My fingers aren't working.
328 on page 2.
That's correct. So for the purpose of the audience, I'll read section 1. The mayor and director of finance are authorized to enter into an agreement with Crestline Paving and Excavating in the amount of $298,391.19 as represented in Exhibit A attached here too. And the mayor and director of finance are further authorized to approve all change orders considered necessary to this project in an amount not to exceed 10% for a total agreement amount of $328,230.31. So we don't want to award anything more than the bid. However, for purposes of audit, we have to have legislation authorizing those payments up to the 10%.
So your suggestion I should read legislation first?
I would suggest that sometimes that is helpful, yes.
I will say that when this was before the committee, we had just, I think last council meeting, had a couple final change orders. This is the new system that is being put in place where we're trying to make it so change orders don't come, and they provided the reasoning for the 10% at the committee level. So,
If I may interject as well, I believe, and I will make the request that the administration, when we go into these change orders, will report those back to the appropriate committee as well, so that way we're aware.
Councilman Coolman is right. This is the result of, past practices had resulted of council, us having to come back to council for change orders and things. We tried to provide more upfront information, and even though it's authorized, it would be what we've conveyed to the administration, that we would come back to council and report if we're in excess of the contract price. This is where there's a contingency, and here's why. Even if it's authorized, we would report that out.
Okay. So it'll most likely be with the contractor that the legislation says.
Right.
Thank you.
Roll call. I'm sorry, any other discussion? Roll call.
Okay, Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Ms. Bourne,
No.
Mr. Van Huzen,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Resolution 48, 2020, and move that the rules be suspended, allowed for its reading by number and title only, and dispense with the second and third readings.
Second.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Okay, resolution number 48, 2020, a resolution authorizing an LPA agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for the construction of State Route 25 improvements, including the addition of left turn lanes on State Route 25, upgrading of Preston Parkway and Fort Meigs Road approaches, and the installation of signals and walkways, ODOT PID number 111509, and declaring an emergency.
I move that Resolution 48, 2020 be passed as emergency measure.
Discussion. Oh. Second and discussion. Sorry, my bad. No discussion. Roll call.
Okay, Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
and Mr. Van Huzen,
Yes.
Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Thank you.
This way does give you a break, Dave.
I would like to introduce Resolution 49, 2020, and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only, and to dispense with the second and third reading.
Second.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Resolution number 49, 2020, a resolution authorizing an LPA agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for the construction of State Route 25 and Roachton Road improvements, including the upgrading of pavement markings, signage, and signalization, ODOT PID number 104493, and declaring an emergency.
I move that Resolution 49, 2020 be passed as emergency.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Okay, Mr. Van Huzen,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would like to introduce Resolution 50, 2020, and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only, and dispense with the second and third reading.
Second.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Resolution number 50, 2020, a resolution authorizing a purchase agreement with Rush Truck Centers not to exceed $84,216.14 for the purchase of a 2021 International HV 507 cab and chassis snowplow for the Perrysburg Department of Public Service, and declaring an emergency.
I move that Resolution 50, 2020 be passed as emergency resolution.
I'll second.
Discussion.
Can we make these longer? I'd like to hear Dave talk.
Yeah. Thanks.
No discussion. Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would like to introduce Resolution 51, 2020, and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only, and dispense with the second and third reading.
Second.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Resolution number 51, 2020, a resolution authorizing a purchase agreement with Henderson Products Incorporated not to exceed $98,181 for the equipment and outfitting necessary for the acquisition of a snowplow for the Perrysburg Department of Public Service and declaring an emergency.
I move that Resolution 51, 2020 be passed as emergency measure.
Second.
Discussion?
I just have one question. Are we needing a new snowplow? Do we need one? Absolutely.
The short answer is yes. If you want to go into a deeper discussion.
Council, at the committee level the other evening, we discussed the necessity for a snowplow. The current one that we would be replacing is a 2001 snowplow. Has approximately 56,000 miles. While that does not sound like many miles, those are hard miles when you're driving it in the snow with a snowplow and all the equipment attached to it. And it is in need of attention. So what we would like to do is replace it with a more efficient model that will actually have a wetting system and the proper salt spraying system and brining system to be more efficient and effective in our snow plowing, to activate the salt quicker, making it less necessary at times to actually plow snow, and to have it be more proactive. And then the existing piece of equipment would replace an even older piece of equipment that is currently just used specifically for brining. Is it a necessity? Yes. And we feel it needs to be an emergency because we need to get in a very long line in order to get this on order, because with the whole COVID virus situation going on, the suppliers are taking up to 6 months and more in order to turn out a truck. So we would like to get in that order so that we can have it perhaps by the end of winter, which will also take us right into the summer season, where we use it for hauling snow or stones and mulch and a variety of other tasks.
Ms. Cabot, thank you. Do you know if it would be used throughout the city or just certain parts of the city?
This would be used throughout the city, and it would also be used not just by the Department of Public Service, but at times it could also be utilized by the Department of Public Utilities, depending on the job that they were tackling.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion? Roll call?
Okay. Let's start. Mr. Kuhlman.
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Thank you.
I believe that's all I have. I would like to thank Laura for her service to the community and her help with me. I hope I got your name right the last meeting. Don't think I did. And I apologize for that. That's all I have.
Thank you, and we did appreciate council allowing us to go as emergency measures. Safety Committee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no report. Our next meeting will be on September the 22nd at 6 p.m. And if appropriate, I also would like to thank Laura for her service, and it's been great working with you.
Do you have a question?
Yes, actually, yes.
Because it's on the telephone, would you mind coming? Amy, Diane.
Okay.
Hi, Diana Fries, 311 West Indiana Avenue. I guess I have several questions. One is, why are you talking about bike paths in the safety committee? Or the service committee, I'm sorry, when it belongs in recreation? I think we had this discussion in 2002, didn't we, Mr. Mayor? It was in the wrong committee, and we did it again. And
Well, the resolution's already passed.
no, and I get it, but what I'm saying is we need to be more careful.
I think, well, okay.
Okay? All right, and then another one would be, I disagree with you, Mr. Mayor, respectfully. As my memory serves me, when Gary Samples, and actually, ironically, our group was against it, but he's the one that decided to put it on the ballot, and it actually worded bike paths in Perrysburg, not Indiana Avenue.
I don't remember the specific language, but as my recollection was, the intent was that one.
I'm
not that good to disagree with
I
that.
probably still have that ballot.
I'm not going to disagree with that.
And if you're talking about anything on Indiana, the block that I live on, everybody knows it's at the bottom of the hill. It has the old Ewing Creek that runs through it, and I'm sure that Mr. McCarthy and Mr. Mackin can tell you what a mess we had when we messed with that area. It's a creek that runs under. It will cost you a freaking fortune if you decide you're going to do something about it. I would leave it alone. You have archaeological problems because of the old cemetery that exists. I just don't know that it's very practical. So I think that's one thing that we really need to consider before we put any time and money into this. And I guess my last and final would be that the bike path under the bridge, it's going to connect to, I'm kind of lost as to how it's going to connect.
As I understand, the bike path is already there. There's a bike path that goes on the bridge. This is going to connect from that bike path to the park by underneath the fort, the lower part. So it's going to go across and connect to the existing multi-use path.
Okay. All right. Okay, so, and I would ask that if there's any discussion about bike paths and bike lanes, any place, any person that lives on that street should be contacted before we spend time and money. That was promised to us in 2002. And I think it was disrespectful to us to see that it's already in the process again. I mean, we're talking about it and nobody knew about it. So we would appreciate notice.
Duly noted, the resolution that's before you does not involve.
I understand that.
But if there's a bike path, if there's any, I heard you and I would agree that we're going to construct, we'll make sure that the residents on that street all know.
Correct.
That's very fair.
Thank you.
Yes. I think that was one of your biggest complaints last time, was it?
Yes, it was.
Yes,
Absolutely, we did it again.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So now we're on to safety. You didn't have anything, so we're on to recreation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a report to read. Most of you had received it. This is a report from the Perrysburg City Council Recreation Committee report for regular meeting for September 8th, 2020. Present were Chairwoman Deborah Bourne, Councilors Jonathan Smith and Jan Paterni. Chairwoman Bourne called the meeting to order at 6:47 p.m. in Council Chambers. After the Pledge of Allegiance, citizen concerns are requested and none presented. Under old business, Riverside Park cannon stands. Mr. Smith asked if the cannon stands are still in the budget. Chairwoman Bourne responded that she had only received the 2021 budget that day, and had not had an opportunity to review it, but she recalled there was $20,000 to $25,000 in the 2020 budget for this. Mr. Smith commented that he had been at Riverside Park the preceding Saturday and feels that it would be nice to know that the project is progressing. Chairwoman Bourne agreed. B, inclusive playground. Chairwoman Bourne announced that the committee has received a request from the administration to recommend to council that the draft ordinance 14/2020 be adopted. This ordinance is a response to a request from Ryan Wickman, spokesperson for Wood County Plays, and it would amend section 1090.071 of the code, which permits commercial advertising in Rivercrest Park to authorize commercial advertising in Rotary Park as well. At present, Rivercrest Park is the only one of the city's 12 parks which permit this. Chairwoman Bourne commented that she had talked to Ms. Alkire about the ordinance prior to the meeting and noted that it has a clause stating that the issue has been discussed at a meeting on August 11th. Since no meeting had taken place on that date, Ms. Bourne asked that the draft ordinance be amended to reflect this. She then mentioned that she had been told in the August 4th email that city administrator and in August 3rd memo from the law director that the reason for the request was because Mr. Rickman had told them that he had been in contact with a major corporate sponsor who would require advertising signage to participate. Ms. Bourne then asked Mr. Wickman, who was present, the identity of the donor. She stated that she has been and continues to be supportive of this project, as in her opinion are the other committee members, but she does not want to move forward until she has more information. Therefore, she had asked Ms. Alkire to make necessary corrections to the draft ordinance and resubmit it to the committee. Mr. Wickman stated that his organization does not have any secret donors. He said that while he does not want to offend donors, he needs to identify the Ability Center, Wood County Board of Development Disabilities, Mercy Health Partners, and Wood Lane Foundation as the major donors. He also mentioned that a complete list may be found on the organization's website. Mr. Wickman then presented proposed designs for signs which he said would be placed on the fence around the playground. Every contributor, whether personal or corporate, who gives more than $500 will be commemorated with a sign with the size depending on the size of the donation. Ms. Warren commented that she was opposed to authorizing the directors of service, safety, and law to determine who will be permitted to buy advertising in Rotary Park. She feels that these decisions should be made by City Council. Mr. Smith responded that he was concerned that fundraising for PABSC will be damaged because they put up temporary banners in Rivercrest Park and the procedure would slow down their efforts. Ms. Materney said that she feels the city administrator and law director should see it first. Ms. Warren said that council is there for a reason. Chairwoman Warren then asked if there was any rush to complete the project. Mr. Wickman said that there was not. They would like to have it complete by next spring or summer, and they have already raised a total of $550,000 with $170,000 to go. Mr. Smith stated that in his opinion, a delay until October would hurt the fundraising abilities of Mr. Wickman's organization. Ms. Warren responded that her experience in fundraising causes her to believe that this is not the case. Ms. Materney stated that the action of the ordinance should be taken that night, contingent on some subsequent changes. Mr. Wickman complained that as a working father, it was unfair to ask him to return to another meeting. Mr. Smith asked Chairwoman Warren to repeat the requested changes in the ordinance which she had already presented. She did so. Mr. Wickman asked if there are any abuses concerning signage in Rivercrest Park, where it is already permitted, have occurred. Mr. Smith asked if Chairwoman Warren would prefer a separate ordinance for Rotary Park. Ms. Warren stated that Mr. Smith had already proposed this earlier in the meeting, and she agreed with him. Mr. Smith then asked if she wanted the same language in both sections, and Ms. Warren replied that she did not, and her objections to the first ordinance would have to be corrected in a new one. Mr. Wickman reiterated that there is currently no large secret donor. He said that the signs for signage have been created with places for possible future large donors, since the size of the given sign will depend on the size of the donation. He said with the negotiations with future large donors cannot proceed until an ordinance permitting any form of signage in Rotary Park is in place. Mr. Wickman asked if his organization was being penalized. Ms. Warren repeated that she has been in support of his project from the very beginning, but simply wants to be fair and to be a good councilman for the community. Mr. Wickman asked her once again to repeat the changes she had requested in the ordinance. She did so. Ms. Materney stated in her opinion the fact that a secret donor was not mentioned in the ordinance did not affect the ordinance. Ms. Warren responded that it was her decision based on the memo sent by the law director and the city administrator who discussed it. Mr. Wickman stated that regardless of what the city law director and city administrator had said, there is no secret large donor. He stated that the issue was whether any commercial signage would be permitted in Rotary Park. The question was presented that if permission is given, it would be that any entity, not just Wood County Place, could put up commercial advertising in Rotary Park, and this would lead to the gradual commercialization of the city's other parks. Ms. Materney stated that she considers commemorative bricks usually purchased by individual citizens to be commercial advertising. Mr. Wickman stated that in his opinion, any time a large donor offers a substantial amount of money for a project in a park, the city should change its laws so it can take it. Ms. Materney said that she has no problem with this proposal. She considers the design of the playground low-key and tastefully done. Mr. Smith made a motion to recommend to council that the ordinance be passed as is. Ms. Materney seconded, stating that she had read the memos from the law director and the administrator, and that the word secret was not used to describe the unnamed major donor. Chairwoman Warren stated that in order to make a proper decision, we need to have the proper information. Ms. Materney said she had already had enough information to vote. Mr. Wickman asked that the project be moved forward because a month's delay would set back their goal of opening next summer. Mr. Smith called the question. Here ensued a period of discussion between the three council members and Mr. Wickman, during which Ms. Materney stated she felt the inaccuracies of the current draft didn't matter, and Mr. Wickman accused Ms. Warren of only helping his project to get a photo op. Finally, a vote was taken with the result being 2, Smith Materney, to 0, meaning Warren not voting. On C, the splash pad, Ms. Materney stated that she wanted the splash pad removed from the old business section of the agenda because it will always be too expensive to maintain. Chairwoman Warren stated that she wishes to keep it there because it can be acted on in the future as it is. I have in parentheses, it is the chair's prerogative to prepare and edit the agenda. Mr. Smith concurred. D and E, there was no discussion on the multi-purpose wall and the west side handball court. On F, P, A, B, S, C, financials, Chairwoman Warren asked the committee members if they had received their copies, which she had requested from the administration. Ms. Materney said she had received it and had no questions about it. Ms. Warren said she had agreed. Mr. Smith said he had not received it, but was okay with it since the other two members were. On PRAC appointments, Chairwoman Warren suggested that Todd France was appointed to PRAC. Ms. Quinn Baumgartner was reappointed to one of the 2 seats reserved for high school students, and the other was filled by a new member, Caleb Christo. Connor Patrick, whose term had expired, was not reappointed. Chairwoman Warren stated she planned to recognize his service by presenting him with a plaque at a future council meeting when the plaque had been completed. In parentheses I have, it is being donated by a private individual at no cost to the city, which I did mention. And then she would inform Mr. Smith of which council meeting she would like to do this. And number 4, on new business, Mr. Smith stated that he had been out for a run in the parks over the weekend and noticed a lot of trash. He had asked if the city workers could be assigned to clean up the trash on the weekends. Ms. Materney said it's obvious that the parks were very heavily used this summer. Ms. Bourne agreed that the parks need to be maintained and asked if this would be required, paying them overtime. Ms. Materney suggested that a part-time person might be hired to maintain the parks on the weekends. There was also a discussion of recruiting volunteers. On number 5, PRAC report, there is no report because PRAC has not met this year due to the pandemic. The meeting adjourned at 7:30 p.m. Next regular meeting will be October 13th at 6:30 p.m. Report prepared by Deborah L. Warren, Chairwoman, September 14th, 2020. I do have some legislation before you. And I would say, as committee chair, I am obligated by Robert's Rules of Order to introduce ordinance 14, 2020, and move that the rules be suspended to allow its reading by number and title only, and to dispense with the second and third reading.
Second.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne.
No.
Mr. Coleman.
Yes.
It's just, this
I'm
is
sorry, I meant
introduced.
to say yes, sorry.
Okay, got it.
No. And I'd like to add to that if I could, please. Sorry.
Wait. Okay, so we're calling for ordinance.
Okay, I'm putting it on, I'm sorry, I'm putting it on the table. Okay, sorry.
Okay, yes. Okay, Mr. Coleman.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Ordinance number 14, 2020, amending codified ordinance section 1090.071 regarding commercial advertising in city parks, previously enacted in ordinance number 65, 2010 on April 6, 2010.
I do have discussion now.
You got to introduce it.
I had discussion, I needed to.
No, you need to introduce it you need to introduce it for passage, and then there'll be a second, and then it'll be open for discussion.
Well, I guess I could do that.
Thank you.
I would like to introduce ordinance 14-2020 and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only and to dispense with the second and third readings.
We move it to pass. We've already introduced that. In the bottom one.
Okay, I move that ordinance 14-2020 be passed as an emergency measure. Now, are you ready for discussion?
We have a second. So
It doesn't have to be an emergency.
It's not an emergency.
it's not written as an emergency.
It was passed as an emergency, but we don't have to pass this.
Right.
So.
All right. Discussion?
Discussion, yes.
Are you-
We've already had a little bit. Well, I'll try and get the reins back in here. Discussion.
Are you ready? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I
Okay, I would like to say I'd be willing to vote for the introduction of this ordinance if the inaccuracies in it were mentioned at the Recreation Committee meeting are corrected, specifically in reference to a meeting which did not take place, the third whereas, and the fact that it is an emergency measure, which the law director stated not necessarily in the September 3rd, not necessary during the September 3rd memo. If this is not done, then I would vote no.
And I believe that the ordinance we have in front of us was amended to at least say September 8, 2020.
I have some discussion as well.
it was introduced as a emergency measure, so that's what's currently before. I just want to clarify if that would be beneficial to, that's where we're going to be for the resolution, and would that be beneficial to the project?
The legislation currently is not even drafted as an emergency and has not been presented to City Council
Okay.
as an emergency.
All right. Just want to clarify that.
Yeah.
All right, because it was read. All right.
Mr. Wickman, if you could come up. Do you happen to have the renderings with you?
Yeah.
So I believe you showed them to the committee, but I haven't had a chance.
Absolutely.
I take Jan's word that they're tastefully done, and but I would like to take a.
Of like what we want to put on the fence?
Yes.
Okay. I got two renderings. I've got a rendering of, actually I've got three renderings for you. Yeah, this one?
Yeah.
I'll skip over the kind of people. Thank you.
Okay. So this is going to be an iron fence going around the park?
It'll be, yes, it'll be something to that tune. Yes, it'll look
Okay.
like.
Obviously, it's not quite locked in yet, but
Kind of like the one, like that one here goes around.
Yeah.
That's,
I think it's similar to what I saw.
I use the ink, so I'm going to hand it out.
Well, I really don't have many questions for you, Ryan. I just want to say what you are doing for this community, the project you took on yourself, the fundraising you're doing, it exemplifies everything that Perrysburg stands for. It's why I moved here. People are willing to put in what they get out of the town, and I really appreciate your efforts. And I will be trying to help you in any way I can to move this forward. I would also like to apologize that you felt that this project was being discriminated against. I hope that you don't feel that way again.
Thank you.
I'd like to offer a comment. I would join in the apologies that have been offered by Jonathan and Corey. I reviewed a tape of that video twice, and the actions of Chairwoman Gordon that night were inexcusable and a real embarrassment to the city. In the way she questioned you, in the way she commented to fellow committee members, in the way she at times almost gave control of the meeting over to someone who's not a member of the committee and not a member of council. I would congratulate you and Jonathan and Jan for your professionalism. That was just a bizarre milieu. And Jonathan, as a member of the Personnel Committee, I look forward to working on the professionalism code. What I saw that night was a real example of what professionalism is not. And hopefully we're able to correct that. And again, I apologize to you, and you'll have my support for this project as it goes forward.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Whiteman, just wanted to say thank you for what you're doing. I don't need to get into all that other stuff. I think enough has been said. Will these be on the inside facing the for the people inside the playground?
Yeah,
Or on the outside?
so the whole idea of the playground is for kids who get stimulated in a traditional playground setting, is the fencing will keep them and their families safe, and there'll only be one entrance and exit, so it'll be useless to have them facing outward. So yeah, they'll face inside.
So the signage would be on the inside of the fencing, so only the people inside the playground would see the...
Correct.
advertising.
Yes, granted, we're still obviously in the design trying to figure it out, but I would believe that'd be the general area with families and others sitting there.
Only the people that are watching the games inside the park can see the signage.
Yeah.
And just kind of be clear, wouldn't it be the case that once the money is raised to construct this, that you won't have any further donors, and so once it's built, whatever signage is there is what's going to be there?
Correct. Sorry.
I'm sure somewhere down the road, maybe 10 years down the road, if there needs to be some upkeep or some maintenance done to it and some large-scale work, that we might need some new donors or appreciate some new donors, but beyond something like that, once the signage is up, that's what it's going to be. There's not going to be continuous sales of advertising space.
Correct. We anticipate that whatever donors come forward for the original raising of the funds for the playground, that's who's going to be there. And like you mentioned, we're going to continue to ongo fundraising for in the future when we do need to redo the rubbering surface and that. But at that time, we're not going to be continually adding names to the playgrounds. And those would be more community events. Like we did a rubber duck drop this summer where it was community members donating $5 at a time. It raised about $30,000. So if you do that over the course of 5-10 years, we can raise enough money that hopefully it lessens the burden on the city when maintenance is required.
I just wanted to dispel any concerns that there's going to be an ongoing sale of advertising space.
No, and fingers crossed if the community continues to be as supportive as they have been our fundraising, while we still have a ways to go, hopefully we'll wrap up in the next few months. We just did our calculations last night. We've raised $616,000 out of a projected $750,000 budget.
So Brian, and I would just like to thank you for what you're doing for Perrysburg, and it just goes to show what passion can do. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Just so I can picture what you're attempting to do, I know you said it's somewhat still in the design phase.
Sure.
So with these, the signs would be inward facing.
Yeah.
And do you anticipate just selling as many as you can to go all the way around? Or?
No. Yeah. Number one, we know other playgrounds and parks, especially over at Rivercrest, are faced with vandalism. And so we don't want to create an obstacle for nighttime patrols or that sort of thing to prevent them from seeing in. So we expect this to be a relatively small space. I haven't done the calculations for this space. But I can tell you, it's not going to take up an exceptionally large size of that fence.
That's what I was hoping you would
Yeah,
say.
and you can see, and most of our donors are $500 donors, which would be that fence there with individual names or families on it. So you can imagine that's just maybe, I don't want to guess how many, but it can't be that many on there. So no, we don't anticipate it to be an entire ring or even anything close to
I just
that.
wanted to make sure I understood what you were trying to do. Again, thank you for making Perrysburg better.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I do have something to say on and a couple things, and then if I have comments that you'll like, I will mention in a minute. But on the passage of the ordinance on 14/2020, I took the time to write this out. It needs to be stated that once again, this ordinance is not about the inclusive playground, which is not mentioned anywhere in it. I've always been and will continue to be a supporter of the inclusive playground project, and I'm sure you know that. However, there are serious problems with the ordinance as currently written. It would allow all and any form of commercial advertising in Rotary Park, from patent medicines to cigarettes. Permission to advertise would be granted by 3 employees, which would be a violation of the city charter, which gives elected officials only the power to make decisions such as this. Employees can make recommendations, but the final decision rests with the mayor and council. 3, while the ordinance claims that the permissions will be selective, this is not practical, because once any one business is given permission, any others who are denied will sue, since there is currently no standard to go by. It has not been determined legally where donations to charitable organizations such as Wood County Plays are considered purchases of advertising. If they are not, this entire ordinance is unnecessary. So I am always and will be and have been in support of the inclusive playground and/or Wood County Plays. I do laud your efforts. You came to us initially and said that you do not plan to take taxpayer dollars, and I definitely appreciate that as a person who likes to be fiscally conservative, so I do appreciate that. But I wanted to make sure that you understood that there's nothing in this ordinance that talks about Wood County Plays at all, and that's what I'm asking for, to make sure it's specific and rewritten so it is for and is in favor of you.
I guess the question regarding that, this kind of raises a point, something that I personally am not concerned about, but I guess I'd open it up for discussion, at least if the administration wants to address it. Ms. Bourne said it doesn't specifically grant the administration permission to allow the advertising for the playground, but for all of Rotary Park. And so if there's a concern that the administration might allow people to buy advertising elsewhere in Rotary Park, like on the side of the pavilion or anywhere, I guess it does allow that, or it doesn't not allow that, but at the same time, it's the same. I believe it's the same language that we've had at Rivercrest Park, and the only time that there's been any advertising at Rivercrest Park has been within the ball diamonds, and nothing outside of the ball diamonds, if I'm correct.
That's correct.
So I guess we would be kind of looking to the administration's past practice of limiting it to the ball diamonds, and hopefully they would limit it to the inclusive park and Rotary Park. And if they ever wanted to go outside the ball diamonds or outside the inclusive park, that they would come to council with that.
Yeah, I think the confusion, Mr. Matuzak, is about the
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I guess the point I'm making is I agree with you, it doesn't limit it to the park, but at the same time, Rivercrest hasn't been limited to the ball diamonds. And there hasn't been any abuse at Rivercrest Park, so I wouldn't anticipate any abuse at Rotary Park either. That's, I don't know if anyone has any.
I think
I'll let you in. I will just say it for the record that the Rotary, the bricks, there was a brick walkway at the pavilion for the Rotary. And I think they're selling some of those bricks consistent with what was done at Fort Imagination.
Yeah, well, I'll disagree with Mr. President. I don't consider that commercial.
Well, I'm just making the, I'll just bring it up.
No, I'm not trying to argue that. I just mean.
Yeah, I just want everybody to be clear that there, but anyway, I'll defer to my lawyer.
Thank you. Councilman Matuzak, you are correct. We have limited that at Rivercrest as it is reflective in the ball diamonds. This legislation allows for the advertisement at Rotary Park. We cannot draft legislation for City Council to consider that would only recognize one particular project. That would be unconstitutional. You would be unconstitutionally limiting anyone else from within the city. So I can't accommodate legally any concept that we would just be limiting it to Wood County Plays. It would have to be something that would be open to all review administratively or council. But I would like to point out that, as you've referenced, Mr. Matuzak, our current practice has been very limited within our parks. I don't believe the administration at all is recommending or suggesting that this would be somewhat of an open NASCAR-style advertising. That's not the point of this.
Well, I guess, can you explain to me how, I'm not aware.
I don't.
You said it's unconstitutional to draft legislation that limits it to one project, but then in practice, you're going to limit it to one project.
No, I'm not saying in practice that we will. What I'm
so far.
We have. I don't know if we've been approached, certainly in my time period, with anything with regards to the ball diamonds other than baseball. But
If we were, would we have to allow it outside the ball diamonds, or would it otherwise be unconstitutional if we didn't?
what we have referenced in that language is under city adopted administrative policies of how we would review that. We'd have to follow the same concept. My point is that
the same concept that we would have to follow?
The administrative process of how we would end up reviewing the signage that goes out at Rivercrest for the baseballs.
So if somebody wanted to put up advertising at Rivercrest Park outside the baseball diamonds, we wouldn't necessarily be required to allow it?
I would agree with that.
That's correct.
Okay.
What we can't do is write legislation that says we will only allow PABSC to have access to signage at Rivercrest. We can't limit it to one particular organization. It's an equal protection violation. Legislation has to be for the benefit of all.
Okay, I just want to make it clear, just if we pass this ordinance tonight, we are not giving blanket permission that we're going to accept any advertising he presents at a later date.
That's correct.
It's still subject to review.
That's correct. In fact, Wood County Plays knows there's several steps still that have to be done with specifically referencing the Rotary Park Master Plan to even get signage and fencing and things up there. So
Okay.
no, you're not giving blanket permission. There would be other layers of oversight. Specifically in the master plan, it goes through Planning Commission and ultimately Council.
All right, and then Ryan. So the way I see this, and you probably know more about this process than I do at this point. When you receive your funding and you're starting to build, that's when you will submit a list of donors to be approved, would be my guess, in the final form.
I would certainly hope well before that we would list who the final donors are. As we're going through planning and zoning, that process will start in the next few months because it does take a little while, obviously, to make sure that gets done in time, because our ultimate goal is hopefully sometime late next spring or early next summer when building permits, if we can get the schedules online we'd like to build. I assume it's at least a 3 to 6 month process in planning and zoning and other things. So I would like to get a list and everything 100% done so the city council and everybody can see exactly what this playground is going to look like.
Okay, and then I guess just to also clarify, I think at this point we kind of there's no secret to what you're doing, okay? There's no secret donors at this point. I didn't get that from the email. I got that there are potential substantial donors that want to know if they're going to be able to put their name at this park if they donate. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I can expect that when you submit for approval through the administrative policies for these sponsors, that there's not going to be anybody left off the list that's going to be, a big banner for their purpose.
Goodness, no.
Okay.
No.
And then I also kind of want to address, I think we all at this point probably got reached out to by community members that saw that meeting, okay? I watched it myself. I wasn't at the meeting. But I will, if you would like, if you want to review these minutes because your name comes up quite a bit, if there is anything you feel is unfair in the characterization of how you presented yourself or any statements, I would like to know that as well.
I will add that I was very fair in my report writing, and then I did report on what did happen at the meeting, so it's out there.
Does somebody have the minutes? There's one specific. Is this just what she read?
Okay. Why don't you take Ryan, I suggest you just take a look at them.
Okay.
And if you want to communicate, you can communicate with Council Director, just send it to the administration, and we will distribute it to all council members.
And I just wanted to be clear, because I'm not quoted in that, you are.
Sure.
Or what happened there was, so if there's anything you feel is unfair to how it portrays you, certainly feel free to reach out to us.
Absolutely. I would want to say something right now. I can't find it in here, and I'm not going to waste everybody's time. I will say there was a mischaracterization of my statement when I said, if there ever is another family organization that approaches this council, this community, and says, we're going to raise $750,000 to build a playground that children who currently can't use the dilapidated playgrounds want to raise that fund, give it to the city for not a single dollar of taxpayer money, and build a playground, I would say, where do we sign up if I was city council? And I think I was very misaccurately quoted in these minutes.
Okay, well, take time to review those.
Okay.
Now leave out the word collaborate.
I will add that it was a report, but I think in fairness to our parks, I think they do a good job of maintaining our parks. So.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other discussion? Otherwise, roll call, please.
Okay, where were we? All right. Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Bourne.
No.
Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else? Did you say the next meeting?
Oh, yes. Sorry, Mayor. The next meeting will be next Tuesday. And it is next Tuesday, the second Tuesday of October, and that will be at 6:30 p.m.
Planning and zoning?
Thank you, Your Honor. We met on September 10. President with myself, George Coleman, and Barry Van Hoosen. Also Bridget Laura and Rudy Walters, our planning and zoning administrator, and Mark Easterling, the deputy planning and zoning administrator. We, the committee, have been provided with the rules and regulations of neighboring communities regarding natural screenings, along with a list of plantings that can be maintained at 6 feet provided by Service Director Rob Ross. I said that I didn't see the law need regulating the height of hedges or bushes at all, and Mr. Walters agreed. Pennsylvania hedges or bushes cannot exceed 3.5 feet in the required front yard, but there is no mention of side or rear yards. My thought was that if we are out of norm, we have to ask ourselves why. Mr. Walters said the language was intentionally brought forth to fix a workaround because of people that wanted to install a 6-foot fence and were told they could not. He said that it is meant to protect a view or sight lines. He gave the example of a resident who could see the river from their home, but then their neighbor puts in a row of bushes that blocks their view. He said people are concerned about their view and creating a dividing line, not necessarily the material used. Kevin Randon was present and commented. He recommended that the city delete the language. This is the language regarding bushes and natural fencing, commonly referred to, now we refer to it as arborvitae. He provided pictures of examples to the committee, and Brody Walters explained that they look at plantings and try to determine if it will have a similar effect as a fence. Kevin Randon also brought up some recent plantings at Zor Lutheran Church, and Brody had worked with Doug Williams on behalf of Zor, and the bushes in part were required to screen their parking lot from adjacent residences. And the church has been notified about the requirement, I should say, to maintain the plantings. I pointed out the committee couldn't make a decision on this. All we can do is refer it to the Planning Commission, and we agreed 3-0 to refer to the Planning Commission whether there should be a height limit on natural barriers. Jonathan Smith had asked us to have some sort of discussion about fencing at Fort Beg Cemetery. We talked about the granting of some sort of exception to the cemetery, as it is in the city, the only jointly owned city township property. Brody Walters pointed out, though, that the code says the city will play by its own rules, and he questioned how we tell others in the state Route 25 corridor overlay that they're required to do a masonry wall but give an exception to the cemetery. We also then talked a little bit about the purpose of the fence. Richard Camden noted that it is not continuous, and Brody, and I seem to recall this too, that there were concerns previously raised about vehicle accidents. Brody suggested that strategically placed bollards could be just as effective. Then we did talk about whether fences are even needed. I had a recollection in our joint cemetery board meeting that one or more of the township trustees questioned the need for fencing at one point. I didn't really know where the cemetery board was at on that particular issue. I was not inclined to change the rules, at least at this point, for the reasons stated. Ms. Gavin said the administration would be happy to go to the next cemetery board meeting to discuss available options. Bridget, that next meeting is tomorrow morning. I don't think we were talking tomorrow morning. So.
I could probably do this.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it yet, so we'll have a conversation before we start to interrupt.
You might want to look for October. In the area of other business, I had asked the safety committee to look at regulations regarding obstructions of the right-of-way. The safety committee did look at that and recommended no changes. Bridget pointed out to us that there's another provision, or there's a provision actually in the planning and zoning code that prohibits signs in the right-of-way, and there's discussion as to whether it should be modified or removed. Mr. Walters stated this is the same section of the code that has kept signs off of utility poles and kept the right-of-way for political and advertising signs. I didn't see any basis to get rid of that ordinance. Excuse me, and Bridget clarified that the administration is not in favor of removing or modifying it. Bridget did note that in the 0 block of Maple Street, the city has installed rumble strips, flashing speed lights, and we are in the process of doing a traffic study. However, there are still children at play signs, or actually they've returned and multiplied in the right-of-way. Brody Walters had been contacted by Steve Taylor Sr. of Maple Street, who spoke on behalf of himself, his son, and his daughter and son-in-law, and they asked that the signs on Maple Street be removed. I asked whether the administration had spoken to Mr. Galagowski. Bridget Gavin responded she had not, but DGL, our contractor, has. I asked that the administration reach out to Mr. Galagowski about the signs and give the residents a chance to fix the problem before we have to get into threatening to remove the signs. And Bridget confirmed before the meeting that she has contacted Mr. Galagowski and left word, so hopefully that communication will occur in the near future. Corey Coleman asked if signs in the right-of-way are common in areas with large right-of-ways. He said it, Brody Walters said it's more common in areas without sidewalks because the sidewalk helps delineate where the right-of-way actually exists. There's no further business that night. We have no legislation. We meet again on Wednesday, October 14 at 5:30 p.m.
Thank you. Personnel?
I have no report, but I do have a piece of legislation. So I would like to introduce ordinance 15/2020, move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only and to dispense with the second and third readings.
Second. Roll call?
Okay, Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Ordinance number 15, 2020, amending codified ordinance section 266.12-1, program for substance abuse previously enacted in ordinance number 105-91 on November 5th, 1991, and subsequently amended through ordinance number 103-2003 on June 17th, 2003, and ordinance number 179-2006 on August 1st, 2016.
I move that ordinance 15/2020 be passed.
Second. Discussion? Roll call?
Okay, Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Public utilities?
Thank you, Your Honor. With how long this meeting has, I really wish I had a report to read today to contribute.
I appreciate that.
And several ordinances have passed, but unfortunately I do not today. So I do not have a report, and our next scheduled meeting is for September 23rd at 6:30 p.m.
That is all. Thank you. Very good. Thank you. Any other business for the council?
Yes, I have some other business. I would like to say once again that I am in support of the Wood County Plays, and that message needs to be delivered to others. I have been from the beginning. And number two, I would like to say that I did not care for disparaging comments that were made by Mr. McCarthy this evening. I don't care for that. And it seems like you seem to be in conversation with others as what to say prior to these meetings toward me. I do not care for that. I'd like that to be out there so people know.
Having no other business, do we
Make a motion to adjourn.
all in favor?
Aye.